Welcome to 2 hours of previously unreleased show video, panels, and interviews from the World of Atari show in Las Vegas in 1998. This show gave birth to the Classic Gaming Expos, and then ultimately led to the creation of the National Videogame Museum in Frisco, Texas. If you love video games, you definitely have to check that place out. The show was held at the Holiday Inn Boardwalk Casino, which was torn down in 2006 and replaced by the Las Vegas City Center complex.
Everyone in the back hear me? This is a live test. And the ladies and gentlemen in the rear of the building, or at least this room, hear me right now. Good evening. Okay. I've been asked to say a few words of welcome, and I'm going to accept that challenge. It was probably a year ago that somebody suggested to me that they're going to put on an Atari show, and I have to admit in advance, just to be truthful with everyone, I was skeptical. But as things came together, I looked around at what was going on, and I couldn't hold back anymore, and I had to pitch in. My name is Don Thomas, and I was with Atari for quite a few years at the tail end of Atari's. Thank you very much. Yes. And there were some key people that I want to recognize. I don't want to take a lot of time talking because we're here to have fun. But I want to say, a special thank you to a few people. And actually, there's a lot of people that should be thanked, but there's some key people that need to be right now. Rich Tikichi, and I'm still working on being able to pronounce his name properly. There you are. Did I say it right, sir? Brad here? Brad's still setting up. Quite a few people are still setting up. These gentlemen are probably the forerunners of making this happen for you. You are here because of those two gentlemen. Soon as runner-ups are two other gentlemen that need to be recognized. They're probably also running around quite rapidly trying to get things together so that you're happy tomorrow as well. And that would be Mr. John Hardie and Mr. Kata Ida. And they're probably across the room. I don't see them here raising their hand or taking any bows, so I suspect that they're still running around. Please, as you enjoy yourself this evening and enjoy yourself tomorrow and enjoy yourself Sunday, these people have worked very, very hard. There's other people too, but these are probably the foremost people you should want to step back and recognize. Any joy that you take looking at something of a prototype, of looking something that's still shrink wrapped and you just can't believe that it's lasted this long, it's here because of those four gentlemen. And I really urge you to just take a moment, shake their hand, and just say thank you. They will genuinely appreciate it. For now, I hope they'll accept an applause. I've I asked to very quickly mention that each and every one of you are entitled to the program, and I've got a quick glimpse at it. It's quite impressive. You're all entitled to one. Your badge is the redemption key for that. Tomorrow, as you enter the show your badge, and one of those programs will be presented to you. Is that accurate? Yes. Okay. And I think aside from that, I invite everybody to see the keynotes tomorrow. Mine's at 10:30. I probably will be more verbose tomorrow, so be forewarned. The show opens at 10. Yeah. And other than that, anybody that's got a drink in their hand, please raise it up, have a toast, and have a great time. Welcome to the world of Atari 98.
Everyone say hi. Hi. We love Atari.
Yes, we do.
We hate the Trammels. Just kidding.
Okay.
Would you be willing to keep the Lynx because
Excuse me, partners. Excuse me, partner. Come on.
They did say they were going to move it, so, but they told me that a half hour ago, so I finally just moved it myself. Yeah.
Next, I don't wait for the guys from France to come back. Oh, he's here, but he said he was alive. Brad, one of them on the other side. Want me to go get him? Yeah, please. Well, 130X. They got
Our next keynote is one of the true pioneers of video game design and programming. While at Atari, he designed Night Driver and Missile Command, along with Asteroids and Space Invaders, really vaulted the Atari VCS to prominence. And then he co-founded Imagic, where he produced two of the three most popular games, Demon Attack and Cosmic Arc. Demon Attack sold 3 million copies, was it, Mr. Polk? And he was the Billboard's 1983 Game Designer of the Year. And his career didn't stop there. he was one of the very first pioneers in online gaming, where he designed games for American Online. And later, he was one of the first involved with CD-ROM interactive entertainment. He designed Sewer Shark and Night Trap, believe it or not, in 1986 to 88, which later found its way on the Sega CD in the early 90s. So he was really ahead of his time. Later on, he started PF Magic, where he did balls for the 3DO, and then he designed Dogs and Cats, which each sold over 2.5 million copies. It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Rob Fulop.
I just bought one of these. That's right. And there's nothing like buying your own game. There's something about it. What's weird about buying your own game is when you have to basically, bargain with the guy. And you don't want him to come down in price. You really want him to keep it at $50. You don't want him to come down because it's like, I'll just throw it in. No, I want to pay top dollar. I'm really going to talk a couple things. I'm going to go over some definitions of words that I use to talk about games that may or may not be words that you guys use, but these are the things that I think about what makes a game work. And the first is the notion of premise. I don't know, is that a term that people here know what a premise is? Premise is like in a movie. A premise is the assumption. It's the basic guts of the movie. That's what you assume that the audience likes. And a premise is typically very short, and it's the real DNA. The premise of Star Wars is good conquers evil. That basic premise is the basic nuts and bolts of the movie, and that premise goes over and over and over again, every action-adventure. I just thought The Avengers is a terrible movie, but they have the same basic premise. Good conquers evil. Any bad guy movies, Scarface, the premise is crime doesn't pay. You always show a movie about a bad guy who dies at the end, right? That's the basic deal. So those are the deep storylines of a movie, and the games have the exact same thing going. And the beauty of the early Atari was we figured out all the premises back there. The first 5 years of Atari figured out, I think, the basic 5 premises of games. The first of which I put into Night Driver, which is, has anyone ever played Night Driver? Everyone knows Night Driver. It's the same as pole position, it's the same as Grand Prix, and I was just over at GameWorks, and guess what? Nothing's really changed. They got 18 VR stations in a row, and you're playing the same premise. The premise of all these games is basically go fast. That's the basic premise, right? And that game, Go Fast, is going to be, it worked 10 years ago, it worked 20 years ago, and I guarantee 30 years from now we'll have the same guys here, we'll be really old, we'll be sitting around here, it'll all be VR, but the same basic game will work, Go Fast. Sit in the car and go fast. Don't crash, whatever, that will crash. So that's that class. That's premise number 1. Premise number 2, you got Pong, Breakout, Frogger, Tetris. The premise of all these games is basically anticipation. Those games are all about waiting for that little thing to get there, and that's the basic deal that's worked in all those games. It still works. The game Space Invaders, Galaxian, Phoenix, Robotron, Centipede, Demon Attack. Anyone know the premise of those games? Yes, kill everything. Kill them before they kill you. But those games, they work. They've always worked. They're always going to work. You put a bunch of shit up there, you got to kill it all. Pac-Man has a really difficult premise. A lot of people don't get it. Does anyone know the premise of Pac-Man? The deep play pattern of the Pac-Man Wild Horse?
Finish screen?
Huh?
Finish screen?
Anyone know?
Eat or be eaten. Your vegetables.
The funnest part of Pac-Man is what?
Eating the power.
The power pole, right. It's turning the tables. Pac-Man is about turning the tables. Pac-Man is about, I'm helpless, I'm helpless, I'm helpless, I'm helpless, I'm powerful. That's why the game works. And that is, that may be one of the reasons women like that game. I don't know. But there's a certain deep connection to that feeling of being helpless and then being strong. That makes Pac-Man work really well. It hasn't worked in a lot. You haven't seen that play pattern in a lot of games. It's really powerful, actually. Pac-Man is really the one that brought it straight. And then Adventure, King's Quest, Mist, Ribbon. Does anyone know the premise of those?
Search.
Yeah, it's treasure hunt, basically. You know, and the excitement of finding the old adventure game, right, with Warren Robinette's game when you find the Black Castle, that is just as exciting 20 years ago as going into Ribbon and finding a new world when you go underground. There's not one bit of difference. It's treasure hunt. You find the new thing. So I'm pretty convinced those five play patterns. You go fast, you anticipate, you shoot everything, you turn the tables, and you do a treasure hunt. Those 5 basic patterns were discovered, I believe, back in the first 5 years of Atari. And I don't think we've seen a new game that doesn't involve those 5 that's any good. I don't think so. I mean, just go down the list. When you have your premise, your play pattern, on top of that you lay your gameplay, which is most people here are, people here are obviously fans of gameplay. And the old lesson in Atari that was Nolan would yell at us over and over again was, you got to make it easy to learn and difficult to master. Does that ring a bell? Right? That was the basic Atari thing. And I used to say, easy to say, hard to do. That was the questions. The old Atari, when I was there, 79, 80, 81, the culture of the company really made it what made these games what worked. And the reason was because the culture was so loose. You basically had a setup where you had lab benches set up, and you had your programmers who were individual authors, basically, and you worked at a lab. You have a lab bench, so you weren't working in the office. Your game was up there for public dunking every day. And you sat there, you put your game up there, and it was all peer review. It was all basically, it was the guys, or the guys and one girl, I think. But you basically went to lunch every day, and you came back from lunch, and if the game was fun, guys would stand around someone's PlayStation and play their game. And that was how you knew it was a good game. And if no one was playing your game basically was bogus. And there was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It was very brutal, very simple system, but it only worked because it was all public. There was no privacy. And so you quickly knew what game was good and what game was no good. And if a game came out, it was because people were playing it. If no one was playing your game, the guy who was doing that game realized my game sucks. And just would have to either lose it or get it better. And that's really why it worked, because the winners just came bubbling right up to the top. And there were beautiful examples of how games got designed. The best was Tempest, which I'm watching out here. Tempest is a beautiful game. And it started by the guy who made Missile Command, Dave Toyer, who was the original designer of Missile Command. And he wanted to do 3D Space Invaders. So he sat, and it took him about a year to do 3D Space Invaders. And 3D Space Invaders was basically, as you'd imagine, the monsters would come at you like this, and they'd come marching down. And there was a lot of difficulties with the game. There was screen real estate was a big problem. And the monsters looked great. They were vector monsters, but the game never played well. And it just basically sucked. And it was there, and it was there, and finally he couldn't take it anymore, and we were teasing him so much about it. And it was his decision. He just trashed it one day, and 4 weeks later he showed us Tempest, which Tempest is basically 3D Space Invaders, but the monsters are not monsters, they're just little line segments. And the constraints, he just built these little wells. And again, he would never have in a million years sat down and just dreamed that game up on a piece of graph paper and said, here, you start out as one game, and it didn't work, and after a year of, no one playing his game at lunchtime, he basically said, I can't deal with this anymore. Here, will you play this game? And yeah, we'll play this game, so that was the Tempest game.
Okay, so I'm here with Steve from Wiztronics. How you doing? Okay, Steve's putting together the LYNXvision, which is the Lynx to TV adapter. So, how long have you been in development on this?
7 months. 7 months.
7 months?
7 months.
And when do you expect to have it finished and available to people?
12 weeks from today. So we are by the end of November.
End of November?
Yeah, be ready to ship.
And what's the price point?
$150.
$150?
$150 as an external.
As an external. What about the internal?
The internal, I don't know if we're going to release. Not going to release it. It's I've been explaining to everybody, the current drawer as an internal unit is too much. I'm getting pressure from Brad from Best Electronics to do the internal, so that might change. But right now, we're concentrating on an external version.
Okay. And you had mentioned doing it as a Lynx box, as standalone.
I'm going to suggest that when I get back to New York, we have a meeting on Thursday, I'm going to suggest that we incorporate the Lynx chipset within our box and make it a standalone Lynx tabletop unit. No LCD.
And what type of controller would it use?
Jaguar joystick.
And how long do you think it would take to put that together?
Probably about a night. If the funds are there to do it, probably inside of a month.
And what would the price point be for that?
Probably under $200.
And well, on top of the Lynx adapter, you're also doing the Falcon music mount for the rack case. For the
Well, the rack case has been out for quite some time. The only thing we're working on new is a replacement for the Falcon. So that we won't really get into real detail. We're hoping that before the end of the year to have a replacement machine. No final decisions been made. That I can just tell everybody to check the website, www.wiztronics.com, and that'll tell everybody what they want to know.
Next people up are very distinguished in my opinion. They've been here since day one. They founded probably the first video game magazine, Electronic Games. They followed up with a later version of Electronic Games. I guess their credits include Arcade Express, the EG Hotline, video games, and computer entertainment. And currently working on a website, InsideGames.com. And if you don't know what I'm talking about now, you better start rereading your old magazines. So without any further ado, I'd like to present Arnie Katz and Joyce Worley, two of the original three founders of
Well, actually, Joyce being the shy type.
That's me.
That's what you said. You'd beat me up if I didn't say that. I'm going to actually give a little talk here, and then both Joyce and I will be answering your questions. First, I want to say how honored we are to be here today. I think that World of Atari is a landmark in the history of electronic gaming fandom. I can't tell you how impressed I am to see the level of interest, the level of knowledge, the level of perception of what those games were and what they meant. I can also see that there are a lot of people who, unlike Joyce and I, did not play them when they were new, but have come to them as a classic expression of gaming. And I think that as we look forward to bigger and better and more inclusive inaugurations of this convention in future years, I think this is something that can grow to be a real voice for the classic gamer. And I think we all know that classic games are in an equivocal legal position in some ways. And I think that we all know that if the gamers unite and make their needs known, make themselves visible, that we will probably get a better shake than if we let the corporations and the government and the courts, who know very little about games and even less about why we play them, dictate these policies. I think it's very fitting that this convention is themed to Atari. Atari was a magical company, both for society as a whole, and I must say for Joyce and I as individuals. Atari transformed a toy, which frankly they invented, Pong and so forth. They transformed a toy into a hobby. And they transformed me from a guy who wrote about supermarkets and Joyce from an insurance secretary into, along with Bill Kunkel, the world's first electronic gaming journalist. And there was a Pong machine right in front of the arcade in place of honor on an end cap. And I remember Joyce and I standing there by the hour and playing Pong. As we sat there night after night, playing Air Sea Battle, playing the other very early Atari games, Bill and I realized that for the first time there was something to write about. We conceived the idea of a column called Arcade Hour, which began running in Video Magazine. This was the first time anybody reviewed video games professionally. And from that column grew the first magazine ever devoted to video and computer games, electronic games. And from that magazine has grown the entire field of electronic gaming journalism. And none of it would exist without Atari and what they did in 1978. Again, I want to thank you for inviting us. I hope that you will invite us back in future years to your conventions. I think that there are a lot of things, a lot of areas that all of us fans of vintage games can enjoy and explore together. Thank you very much.
Hey Jerry, there's a rumor that's the redesigned Jaguar they're going to try and bring back.
No, that's right here. Yes, this is the new Jaguar 2. This is the new easier to use controller. This is the new 2 sticks built on. This right here is the new Hasbro Jag 2. Okay? Integrated. You can't see right now because I'm really not supposed to be showing this to you, but this actually has a flip-up DVD player in it. It's got a new version of the Jag Lynx, which works. Okay? And instead of using those crappy Jag controllers, they went back to using the regular Atari controllers. And this is a new, like, sensory joystick. You just move your hand over. It was made specifically for Battlesphere, which comes packed in with this, by the way.
Really?
Yes.
Now that the game is the game complete?
The game is indeed complete.
Battlesphere is finished. We've set that on camera now.
Okay. And it's on TV, we all know it's true.
Absolutely. I believe everything.
How long do you think it's going to take you to get from now to where people can get out and play it and order it?
Well, that's sort of one of those non-linear questions. There's a very hard first step followed by a very easy second step. We have to get this thing encrypted. Atari is gone. Hasbro owns what's left of Atari. Nobody knows what's really going on. As soon as we get it figured out, it will be encrypted. After that, it's a couple weeks and it's available.
All right. And do you plan to follow it up with any other Jaguar or PC-related software?
We'll work.
Jaguar, unless we had funding, no.
If some crazy guy out there wants to hand us $500,000 to do another Jaguar game, we'll do a Jaguar game. We'll do a TRS-80 game. But the key word is funding.
What did you spent a long time doing the development of the game. Do you think that you've tapped the Jaguar's potential?
What do you think?
I know that I've heard you say things about how if you could do the polygon engine over, there are certain things you would do to make it faster.
I think
so. No, but it would be a many-month endeavor.
If we had 100 years to write a Jaguar game, we could probably make the game twice as fast. If we had 1,000 years, we might be able to make it twice as fast plus a little bit. I guess that probably sums it up.
When did you first play Star Raiders?
Star Raiders, 1979 or so?
Right as it came out?
Yeah.
Okay. On an 800 or a 400?
800.
Okay.
saw that game, and I realized I'm going to be saving a lot of money and not spending my allowance for a very long time. I'm going to own one of these things.
Back when it was $60?
Yeah, I believe so.
$59.95?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah.
I had to get the money for the 800. I didn't have a disc drive or a tape drive because I wanted Star Raiders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you, during your Battlesphere development, did you still go back to play Star Raiders just to remember?
Absolutely. You want to get a feel
Yeah.
of how a game flows, and that is the best space battle game ever done, in my opinion.
Still.
Yeah, I mean, sure, they've beaten the graphics, and I really like TIE Fighter, but if you want to get a game that just grabs you and pulls you in, that's the one.
Yeah.
It's like Mule. Mule's a wonderful game, too. I missed the photo of when you two had you staged another one.
64-bit kids! So what are you doing now?
Well, right now I'm freelancing as a musician. I'm also finishing my PhD in applied math. Scott, on the other hand.
I work at DM Labs, and when I'm working on it, I can tell you about, but then I'd have to kill everyone. Since you're probably watching this on TV, I don't know who you are.
That would be bad.
That'd be very bad.
Next two gentlemen up are both former Atari alumnus, and I think you'll be very happy with what they have to say today. One of the gentlemen is the man responsible for the creation of the 2600, 5200 trackballs. His nickname over the years is Trackman. The other gentleman was involved with the some say ill-fated, I say cool, Atari 2000 prototype, which I think you'll get a chance to see here. But I'm going to let them go more in depth about what they did and what they've done over the years. And so let me introduce to you Mr. Jerry Jessop, Mr. Dan Kramer.
Jerry and I worked in the hardware lab together for a couple of years or so. I was hired in a little bit before him, and a lot of people sort of fantasize about, wow, was that a neat place to work? And then sometimes people get let down. I can tell you it was a fantastic place to work, and it wasn't our imagination that we were doing some of the coolest, funnest, neat stuff that we've ever encountered. And yeah, it was a circus all day long every day. But we got the work done and we turned out product. Sometimes good product, sometimes okay product, and sometimes disastrous product. And it still went out. But overall, I think the legacy was pretty darn good. And getting the trackball into production didn't seem to be as scary as getting it officialized and created as a product. In order to show what it could do, I started dropping things all over the place. And this is one of, I believe I have two of these. This is essentially a composite prototype hardware kludge that not only plays on 5200, a 15-pin connector cable, it also has an 8-pin, 9-pin connector cable, and this will plug also into the 800. And it will play Missile Command on the 800. It not only has the equivalent of all the 5200 controls, like the start, pause, reset, and it has 3 fire buttons for playing on the 800, and a switch that flips it over. There's your keypad, stolen from a VCS, and this is a coin-op centipede trackball assembly. On the side here is the actual circuit board that I designed and etched in our lab etching room, which was sort of a toxic waste dump that we managed to keep it from blowing up. Yeah, it was pretty scary in there. And so these are the kind of things that had to be done in order to get this turned into something that would work. Once I had several of these going, the software had one, and I had one in the lab, and I was using one for handout promotion and stuff. The industrial design group wanted to show what it could be as an actual physical embodiment, so they built these, well, they had several nicknames for them, like hog-outs and design models and so on. It's a visual model made out of machined plastic and parts that are not shot in a mold, just to show what the thing's going to look like, to get a feel for it, the ergonomics, the physical size, and the appearance. And they do their best to make it a cosmetically appealing item. But that wasn't enough for me. This is the original first-off hog-out prototype made by Industrial Design Department at Atari for the 5200 trackball. They made this, They made one also that was only a one-sided model, which only included one keypad and one set of fire buttons, where the right hand would play the ball and the left hand would do the controls, and there was nothing here. It was a little more shortened and elongated. So it discriminated against left-handed game players. And I had been reading letters in gamer magazines already about left-hand game players who felt really left out and irritated because every product that came out discriminated against them. As a result, the single-sided trackball model conveniently vanished, and the dual-sided one was everywhere. And as time went on, people forgot about the single-sided one, and this became the standard, regardless of the additional cost involved in putting all this extra plastic and components on this side. And that was one of the other achievements I felt was very important. Nowadays, it is still a continuing issue, and I think that to be able to provide a non-discriminating controller for as many people as possible is one of the real achievements you can do when you want to interface a human being to any kind of a game machine, computer, mechanical device, or anything like that. So I took this thing, and it was just a piece of plastic that you look at, and I said that's not good enough, and I actually built working electronics into it. I freed up the glued-in fire buttons, set them up with dome switches just as best I could make it, and we actually took this to trade show for demo and had it on display for gameplay and let people hammer away at it for 2 days. And it survived. I took it back to the lab and reworked it and made it okay, and within a couple months or so, the actual molds off the tool were coming in, so I began building prototype plastic ones and handing them out everywhere I could. The actual production of the trackball trailed the release of the 5200 by a short period of time, but there was enough consciousness in the software group to put the compatibility factor in for the games that we felt would play well with the trackball, and that essentially made it so that it was retro compatible for games that had already been released, which I also thought was one of the main things that made it a great value for anybody who bought this off the shelf when they already had the console and the pack-out controller.
First of all, Dan is way too modest about the trackball. Do you get the impression he's real proud of it? I'm jealous because he actually got to work on something that was really cool, and it came out. And I worked on stuff that sucked. It never came out, or the company collapsed before it was about to come out. So I'm kind of jealous. But there was a universal hatred for this controller at Atari. Okay? Nobody liked this controller. And they coined a phrase. You ever hear the phrase checks in the mail? Well, the phrase there was, it's only a prototype. The finished version will work perfect.
When's the finished product coming out?
Good question. I'm scared to even use his name. Actually, a really great guy designed this, nicest guy in the world, but didn't play video games. That was the problem. Didn't play video games. And what happened was, the remote control VCS, the 2700, which I don't know if you've seen it in the museum or not, started a very disastrous trend at Atari. And here's the remote control VCS controller. And it started a trend of, let's forget about what the purpose of playing a video game is, which is to play a video game. They forgot human engineering. In fact, we'd bring this up to people in engineering, and then when it didn't sink in, we would just mock them and start making fun of them. So we would walk around with our hands like this, because if you put your hands out, they go out like this. Well, these controllers are designed to be held like this. And 2700, 5200, Pro line, they couldn't get away from this. And what happened was, it was no fun. The games stuck. Now this controller right here, the interesting thing about it, monetarily, because when this came out about 82, 83, people at Atari, especially in engineering, were pretty much, a lot of them were driven by monetary motivations. And I can tell you that shoveling money on people doesn't motivate them, nor does it promote good products. It certainly didn't work for VCS Pac-Man. And I'll tell you, the truck was big that backed up to Todd Fry's office. But the guy who did this controller got 12 patents into it. Each patent was worth $1,000, right?
2,000, at least from what I know. 1,000 when the patent is filed, received by the patent office, they acknowledge that they've got it in their queue. 1,000 more when they actually finish the process and grant the patent.
Yeah.
2K.
So $24,000 for designing something backwards. Okay, because there's tons of gimbal style analog controllers, and you use them on RC radio for cars, stuff like that. And we would actually hack those units in here, and they'd work perfect, and they'd self-center. And we kept, bringing up the subject. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this analog transaxle type arrangement on this controller? And now to get back to your question, which I almost forgot about. Why did this controller look like this besides being sideways fire buttons? Did you ever see the ads of the Intellivision controllers versus the Atari controllers? We have 16 positions versus Atari's 8 and a keypad. Well, we've got the keypad. We don't have 16 bits, we have 360 degrees of non-self-centering, non-precise analog control, so it'll look better in an ad. But as you all know, this thing was a horrible product. And quite frankly, Dan and I were scared because we wanted to keep our jobs. And we knew that things were going down. We knew that there was going to be a backlash with stuff like this. Actually, I worked on a lot of real cool projects, a lot of cost reduction projects, single-sided VCS. They're really driven by cost reductions. And one of the things that people really need to think about Atari, after Nolan Bushnell left, and Nolan left in early '79. He had sold the company, but he left in early '79. There was really no new product development that ever came out of Atari after that. Everything was a rehash, repackage of the same old stuff until the ST arrived with the Tremels. There was nothing new done. Everything was repackaged. And Atari never killed a product before it was completely done. So they wasted maximum amounts of money and maximum amounts of engineering time and talent. And that was really the key. Everybody was distracted, chasing little pet projects that some guy in marketing thought would be a good idea, waste maximum amounts of dollars, blow a year working on this, when you should have been doing something more productive. They should have been working on a 16-bit system, should have had a new chipset for the 800, but instead, working on stuff like this. The CX2000. And how this came about, I only learned the true story last year at Nolan Bushnell's house when I got a chance to meet Steve Mayer, who was sort of the father of this. And Steve Mayer was one of the original designers of the 2600. And I had never met him until last year because he moved out to New York and worked in a New York design lab for Atari. And he kind of threw out an idea to people that, if you cut a lot of the plastic out of the 2600 and you reduce the packaging, that's where you're going to save money. Because if you've ever opened a 2600, there's nothing to take out of there to save money. You can't get rid of the TIA, you can't get rid of the processor. There's just a handful of components anyway. The thing's cheap to make, so you reduce the size of the packaging and the pack out. So somebody in marketing gets this idea. Oh, what Steve means is make a very flat console and stick the controllers on it. Now clearly, this product never could have been sold. But we were forced to work on it. There's even a custom chip in here called the Combo Hybrid chip, which is actually a conglomeration of the 6532 and the 6507 put onto a little daughter board which plugs into a 48-pin socket because we were so short on real estate board space, because we couldn't use anything out here. We had these switches which were right in the middle of the shield, and I designed the Combo Hybrid chip, and that I almost lost my hair because of that, because it was kind of a big task, and the senior project engineer kind of gave it to me to do, and I had to work with Rockwell, who had the dies for the chips, and I did this design and layout, and we got our first samples, and none of them worked. None of them worked. Couldn't figure it out. I worked 48 hours straight, tracing things, trying to figure out why am I so stupid? Why does this not work? Then the next week I found out from the guy that I got the parts from, he says, oh, you needed dies that worked? We thought you just wanted to fit things up. But getting back to this, when after all this work had been done, they then decided, let's do a focus group test on it. And I guess it didn't do real well. They wouldn't really tell me. But the guys in marketing were pretty embarrassed. But they had a backup plan. And the backup plan was, well, if a normal human being can't play this thing, maybe an infant could. So that's why you see some of these brown and some of them blue. In fact, that's why if you look in the museum, you see a blue one. Because what they did is some guy had a harebrained scheme. Let's paint it blue with yellow fire buttons. And if you notice, the kids' controllers came out blue. And let's do a kids pack out. And I don't know what happened. I think I got mentioned.
Okay, now also when you get on one bank, it opens the return lane on the bottom. So for one pass through, instead of losing the ball notes. Wait. Yeah, for a few years. All the shots will work really well unless the game is not. It's pulling the light really bad right now. When it's done, it really cooks. But by the time he finished this design, he had multi-ball, multi-level games out like Black Knight and see that orange light flashing there? Yeah. The game is counting the hits on the slingshots. Just like Space Invaders counted, and then put the spaceship across the back. He stole that from Space Invaders. After 5 more slingshot hits, and moved the right for 5 more, and then looked away for 27 hits, I think. Prints and documentation for this too. I've got up in my way. I'll put them out as you
Rant installer?
This is completely original with the exception of one component. The key. And it will, that's true, the key is
my center D had to be rewired early.
No, I should have still saved that crazy climber tabletop.
I live for my missile command machine. Oh my god.
Okay, original TV monitor. I want to get the dust. Believe me, it's not dusty as it was when I found it.
We'll get you in there too. You got it, but I'm moving.
See the diodes for the ship animation?
Oh wow. You can see them on the board even.
Yeah. You got to get. You got to come around and get a picture of the original lacquer thinner can that was used as the coin holder. There we go. We'll get you over. I got my own problem. You guys are always down.
But the next gentleman we have is an even bigger saga than mine in his career. Worked with Arnie, Katz, and Joyce Worley in starting Electronic Games, done Inside Games, and honestly, if you look at his bio, 2-page spread, it's mind-boggling what the gentleman has done. So I'm going to let him tell a little bit about himself and his achievements, because I can't memorize that much. So let me present to you Bill Kunkel.
unfortunately for you guys, I can't remember it either. So, no, I've basically spent 20 years trying to keep from getting a job, and so far I've been successful. And I think the secret to that has been that I learned very early in this industry that if you want to stick around, you got to learn to do everything. I mean, let's see, writing books, press releases, testifying as an expert witness, starting magazines, launching websites. I mean, you know, the only thing I haven't done in 20 years, I can honestly say, is I've never programmed a line of code, and I never intend to. You know, with that out of the way, I had an idea. I'm not much at writing speeches and stuff, so I thought I would do a virtual slideshow for you. We're in the virtual age, so let's imagine there was a 3D screen behind me, and I'm going to flip the little slide projector here. The slides are all screwed up, so they're not in order. But the first slide coming up, okay, this is me visiting Vendel in 1981, the Atari headquarters. It is a city, folks. I mean, this is not a building. This is R&D for the 2600, for the next generation systems after the 2600, for Atari computers, and for Atari coin-ops. They're doing the R&D, they're doing the production. This place needed a monorail system. I have never seen anything like it in my life, and I think if Atari symbolizes gaming in a lot of ways to a lot of people in this room, it's because nothing, not even Nintendo at its biggest, ever had a city. I mean, this place was incredible. Watching them put together Red Baron machines in the coin-op department, and going over and seeing championship soccer being developed, and the developer going out to his boss to tell him he was going to do it in a vertical scroll, and the boss telling him, you can't do a vertical scroll on the 2600. And he said, I'm glad you didn't tell me that last week. I learned a long time ago there are two kind of people in this business. There are the people who say, well, here are the rules, here's what you can do, and here's what you can't do. And there are the people who say, here's what I want to do, I'll find a way to do it. And I've been fortunate to meet a lot of those people. One of the next slide coming up here, I believe, is Jared Lanier, a name that may not be that familiar to a lot of people here, but he's the gentleman who coined the term virtual reality. But he didn't have the same idea about virtual reality that we do today. He came in to visit our offices, visit Arnie, Joyce, and I, at Electronic Games headquarters. He showed up in a caftan, the wildest afro I'd ever seen in a white man. And he had a monitor set up and a little video camera. And he said, sit down in front of the video camera. I sit down, I look on the screen, there's a set of drums in front of me. He says, hit the drum. So I hit the drum and I hear a drum sound. He says, keep hitting the drums. Playing bongos and playing drums. And he said, I call this virtual reality. I said, well, that's pretty cool, man. 10 years later, virtual reality was discovered by the rest of the world. And it was something different. And there were then 8 definitions for virtual reality, but when I think about it, I'm still sitting back in that office hitting those electronic bongos. At our office shower, we did so well with Electronic Games magazine. This was the great success story, I think, of all of Arnie, Joyce, and my lives. I mean, we had this idea for a magazine, okay? We knew there were going to be magazines about games. There's always magazines about anything that people take as part of their lifestyle. The question was, could we get that magazine out first? And I remember a period, in those days it used to take a long time to get things published. You would write them, and by the time they'd appear on the newsstand, you'd read them and go, who the hell wrote this? It'd be, 5 months later or something. So we had about a 5-month stretch between when we first finished, put to bed, Electronic Games #1, and the day that it actually hit the stands. And I went out every day to the newsstand, truly expecting to see another magazine sitting there that had beat us. And every day I went, and that magazine was never there. Matter of fact, that magazine didn't turn up for about 6 months after our first issue appeared. So for 6 months, we were the gaming press. Of course, the gaming industry was a lot smaller in those days, but to be the gaming president with 3 people, and that was it, you know. We would visit the 5 or 6 companies that were at CES that represented the entire game industry. And in 20 years, I watched that segment of the industry grow so large that CES could no longer hold them, and they had to start their own show. And we've now had, what, 4 years of E3. Thank God I will never be in Atlanta again. The next picture is one of my special favorites. It's me defeating Trip Hawkins in a game of one-on-one. If you notice, he is crying. I remember the reports of the newsstand sales when Electronic Games went out. I remember one thing in particular. I remember getting a call back from the distributor saying that the newsstands wanted more copies. I think the last time the newsstands had asked for more copies of something was when Playboy ran a nude spread on Queen Elizabeth. So this was kind of an unusual thing. I think that was the moment that we knew that this was going to happen, that there was going to be a hobby called electronic gaming. And even in 1984, as bad as things got during the great fallout, shakeout, whatever you want to call it, I think we always had faith that it would come back. I remember a period so dark at the end of the day, last days of electronic games that we were forbidden editorially to use the word game in the magazine. They already changed the title to electronic entertainment, and at that point you really weren't supposed to be playing games. The only way you could play a game in 1985 was if it was a simulation. So flight simulators were born because it was the only way people could play games without being laughed at. I think, you know, we discussed before the issue of will the game industry ever collapse again? And it's kind of like the Depression, you know, we had the Depression, and people said, that was terrible, I don't think we ever want to have that again. So let's set up stuff and let's make sure that this doesn't happen again. And I fully agree that it never will, that the industry is now so strong that it's as likely that the movie industry will die as it is that the electronic entertainment industry will die. I remember testifying. In fact, the next clip, I believe, it's the Game Genie case. I had a lot of sense. I mean, I was really smart about picking the companies I was going to testify against and for. First time was in 1982, when I testified for Magnavox against Atari. Probably not the best career choice one could have made. Yet I happen to believe that Odyssey was right. It involved a game called Casey Munchkin. I don't know if anybody remembers that game. But at the time, Atari had decided it paid damn good money for its Pac-Man license, and it was not going to allow any other Gobble games to live on the face of the earth in any format on any machine. They originally went after all those small developers that had put out games like Ghost Chase, and Harry Jawbreaker, and I probably could think of 1,000 Piranha, a Snack Man, and here's one company, Odyssey, that develops a Gobble game that's unique. The idea of this game is that the fewer dots are on the screen, the faster they move, and you've got to chase them around and catch them. To me, this was as major a step beyond the original game as, you know, Galaxian had been past Space Invaders. I felt it was totally legitimate, so nobody at Atari talked to me for a couple of years, but the next guys I went up against were Nintendo. This was in about 1990, I guess, maybe 89, 90, when they were at the absolute height of their power. I testified for those giants of the industry, Galoob. So my court, and yet I won 2 out of 3 of my cases, so I guess I didn't pick the totally wrong side.
Okay, next up, our next speaker. I'm looking in my little book here of cheat sheets, and there's nothing there because he's our surprise guest today. This gentleman was responsible for Crow and Millipede on the 2600. As you heard him being mentioned by Dan Kramer and Joyce before. He also, which I just found out yesterday, he wrote Venture, the arcade game, over a decade. He worked on that. So let me tell you a little bit. Let him tell you a little bit about himself. Mr. Dave Stargis.
Well, I guess you didn't see me on the list there because I was vacillating whether to come or not. I didn't know if I would come, so I said I would just 5 days ago. So here I am. Anyway, it's been a long, strange trip. I was with Atari for accumulated 14 years, maybe. I think I said 16, but it was really cool. Survived the transition from the Warner Communications days to Jack Trammell. Actually worked for Jack Trammell's group longer than the earlier incarnation, but started in around almost 80, September of 80 is when I started. I was working at XD, came to Atari, went back to XD, and went back to Atari, ping pong between XD and Atari. And so I only worked for Atari for 5 months in 80, 81. And that time I got involved with the 810 disk drive and looked at the source code for the firmware and started learning how to use a logic analyzer and find better ways to do it. And of course I started mucking around with the code and ended up making the Revy firmware for the 810 disk drive. And then I went over to and then I worked on Millipede. And at that time, GCC had done Centipede, which is a very similar game to Millipede, and they were going to do Millipede as well, and they'd already started working on it. And I was given the chance to compete with them, so we were in competition who could make the best Millipede, and I wanted to win, so I did. I had to make the better one, and I think I did. So I think the game is, I'm proud of Millipede.
The 2600 Millipede is really a wonderful product. And as I recall, those bank switches, they had to be bank switches.
The bank switch was there around too. So instead of 128 bytes, got to 156 bytes.
Right. Was there a lot of pressure to avoid using those techniques? And you had Millipede out. I don't know how you did it as it is, but it would be impossible to put it any less. Was there a lot of pressure to keep to a smaller value?
To a smaller size?
Yeah.
No, there was pressure the other way. They said, we have this new bank switching technology, use it. It's cost effective now. The costs have come down. Moore's Law had a chance to kick in, and so I guess it was cheap enough to go ahead. You make a better game, you're welcome to it. Bill Aspermani, who was working on Stargate, and he's a great VCS programmer. He only needed 8K. I mean, I didn't even fill it. It's actually 15K. You don't get 50. When you have to use some of the address space for the RAM, and there's no read and write line, so you have to map a mirror image of the read addresses and the write addresses, so that uses one of the address lines to tell which is reading and writing. I don't know exactly how they did it in the hardware, but it was on the cartridge. Yeah, there were some neat things I think I did that were never done on any other VCS cartridges, like sound. I had a 9-line kernel basically that was repeated down the screen. These zones where critters could cut across or descend or go at diagonals and shoot it back up again. In that 9-line kernel was part of the sound driver, so that was there. I was bank switching quite a bit. What else? I had this variable. I had a way of sloughing off processing sometimes. And when I would estimate how long it would take, just by trial and error, how long it would take to process. If I got a lot of critters on the screen at once, you'd have to just sort of skip, alternating skips the processing of some of them, get around to them, put them on a queue, and then get around to the next time, and then make their motion instead of 1 pixel per frame motion, you'd have to do 2 pixels every second frame, sort of thing, to maintain the speed of it. Just little tricks like that I was doing. Also, all the VCS programmers would use the standard wait until the timer expires loop. And sometimes I wouldn't get the processing done in time, and I would miss the timer, and then the screen would completely glitch, and lose a whole frame, and I would roll the screen. So I wasn't able to avoid that, and the way I made it much less noticeable, and the testers didn't notice it at all, is that I didn't wait until the timer equaled 0. I just waited until it was, I used the sine bit or something, test on sine, loop until, if it goes negative, then you can break out of the loop on the timer. So that allowed, if you were late, it would just jitter, just imperceptibly, and it wouldn't be so noticeable. And the testers said that was great, it didn't work, he didn't see any faults with that. I don't know why anyone didn't think of that before. Another thing I did for the VCS was the lighting. So I started fiddling around. It was a cool machine, the ST, and I really liked playing, pushing the envelope and seeing what I can do. And since I was from the VCS world, I'm used to this beam following business and real time, making real performance, getting the most performance you can, using all the dirty tricks you can. So I started working on a thing I called it FAT, for the fat bits. Like Mac Paint, I wanted to do something like, I really didn't intend to do something like Mac Paint. I wanted to just make a little tool so that we could make demos for the show and show off the colors and what kind of graphics capability the Atari had, the ST had. And it ended up being Neutron. So, got a lot of strokes for Neutron, and mostly from Germany, fan mail, and it was very gratifying. So I worked on it a long time, and I even defied my boss, Leonard, continuing to work on it. He told me to stop working on it. I ended up working on it for 12 months, something like this. And, I knew that I had something when they used it for the first annual report, the cover of the first annual report. And the cover art on the first box of the Atari ST was of Neutron. And they used it in the Scientific American double-page ad for the ST. So I knew that it was something they wanted, they liked. The people liked it. So, and then I was working on the emulator, the 2600 emulator for the Jaguar right at the end. That was 90% complete, but I don't know if it could have been complete. I was really worried that, maybe went the wrong way on it was kind of it was an interpret that basically took the image of the cartridge and just interpreted in real time. And I kept up. There's a lot of considerations that, you have this fat bitmap that you can put a display up. It's not the same thing as this beam chaser, beam follower, where you're keeping track of the position of the beam of the television. But I learned a few things about emulators, and it was fun. It's like that was the great thing about Atari, is just new stuff just kept coming, and I got worked on it, and I got stuff released, and it was out there, and that was really heavy. It was amazing. And my roommate, he sells 8 million units, of Pac-Man, and I think Millipede sold 250,000 units. That's a lot of users. So I felt kind of lucky to be in the right place at the right time and have a lot of fun doing this stuff and getting fan mail. Can't complain. It's too bad it's over, but it was fun while it lasted. And, had a great time. So.
Player 1, get ready. Well done. Player 1, ready. Shield activated. Player 1. Shield activated. Well done. Player 1, ready. Player 1, get ready. Shield activated. Well done. Player 1, get ready.
Well, because you've got
wireless infrared doesn't work.
Yeah. In fact, you got. What's better up here? What's a lot better?
How do you like it, Jerry?
I like it.
Try the dual shot?
Yeah, I think that would be awesome.
Okay, try it right now?
Wireless. You mean it's wireless?
Yeah, it's wireless.
The video is wireless. The whole system
but the whole system is wireless.
First dual shot wireless. Get out of here. There's a wire right there.
I know.
I'm telling you, nobody, this is stuff we say. Just battle for
I'm not surprised by anything Sony does.
I said, what street? Mount Drive. I said, I lived on Mount Drive. His cousins live like right behind me. He lives further down the next town.
No, but not
Has to be right.
I've been told to say there's one more space for somebody to join in the Battlesphere tournament.
I want to play! I want to play!
Mark may not play.
Play just doesn't count. Okay, so we've got a single console. Take out a ship and blow things up. I mean, it's Doom-like gratification. We got a little bored with that. We have more complex play modes like One Against the Empire's Gauntlet, and we even have training if you can't figure out the controls. Okay, so we're just going to free-for-all deathmatch mode. Let's give it a bunch of robot ships. 15 robot ships up all against you and each other. The AI ranges from fodder to postal to demonic to mid to our highest level. Can you tell who we idolize? Okay, so
The Devil and Jeff Hunter.
set this to something really abominably low so the game lasts very long. We'll let all ship types in and play away. What ship should I take, Steph? Physically modified. I think he generally intends to deliver. Cat loss from his handy. Yeah. No, I think he generally intends to deliver. No kidding. Because I talked to 12.
I believe you.
Got it. All right. Winner.
Good game. I'm not going to picture you guys. How about against that wall? 3. Give me the prize. Give it. Oh, yeah, but give it John to the Sandy John. Yeah, over here. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I get lost.
Was that working yesterday?
Oh, the LeGrand's playing. I think we have a ringer in here.
That's why I want to
thing for each other. The brain really knows how to dish it out.
You could say we have saved one of the best for last. Next gentleman is well known for his masterpiece creations. Many of you know he's a gentleman who wrote Frogger, Jawbreaker, Mouse Attack, a lot of stuff done for Sierra Online in the early 8-bit Atari days, 8-bit computer. And one of the, just a note, I double check my facts so I don't make a fool of myself, but one of my favorite stories that I either read, as John told it years ago in a magazine or something, was at one of the trade shows they were showing Apple Frogger, and it was really hooked up to an Atari underneath, hidden by the tablecloth. But that's because I'm partial to Atari, I like that. But let me present to you, and he can tell you more about himself, Mr. John Harris.
Thank you. Boy, it's really great to be here. I thank you everybody who still remembers who I am. I've really enjoyed all the introductions, meeting people in the hallways, signing the autographs. It's been really quite a thrill. One of the things that happened to me when I first got started that just it was really a surprise. I was I took a trip to Kentucky for completely different purposes. We were working on a motion picture film, and I was in the middle of working on some stuff, and so I took my Atari 800 computer with me, and kind of walking through the airport with my computer, and some guy just in the hall, he says, oh, I see you've got an Atari computer. Do you like it? And I said, oh well, yeah, I love it. It's what I do for a living. And he says, oh, really? What's your name? And I said, John Harris. He said, the John Harris? And I was floored. Here I was all the way across the country, and I was like 20 years old, and that was like shortly after Jawbreaker had been released. And it just surprised the heck out of me that people even knew who I was. And so coming back here has been really fun. But that was that was where I got started. That was shortly before Jawbreaker, and that was the first game that I did for online systems. Actually, I really just wrote Pac-Man. I looked at the arcade game, said, this is fun. Wrote the game on the Atari. I had seen other people doing it as a 19-year-old kid. I didn't even know what a copyright was. I didn't know it was wrong to copy someone else's work. So took it up to Ken Williams, and I guess I just got into the industry right at the time that the video game companies started cracking down on the home computer versions. So Ken Williams takes a look at it and says, I'm sorry, I can't sell that. It looks too much like Pac-Man. You're going to have to disguise this a little bit if you want me to sell it. So I brought it in the next day, and I put mustaches and sunglasses on all the ghosts. And while good for a laugh, it was obviously not what they had in mind. And I still have that version. Some gentleman approached me probably about 4 years ago, 5 years ago. He wanted to re-release the Jawbreaker Mouse Attack pair on disc in the European market again, and I said, sure, as far as I know, I have the rights to them. I know nobody's going to complain if I don't. So I went ahead and said fine, and I tried to get this version of Pac-Man to throw on the disc as well, and found that it didn't load. It had like 3 or 4 bad sectors on the only copy of the disc I had, so I was really crushed. And then I thought, well, I'm just going to look and see, drag the pieces I had. I had some pieces of source code and some pieces of object code, and I put it together, grabbed as much stuff as I could, and then I just went in and, literally looked at the object code, found the missing stuff, and just did my best to fill in the pieces. And it does seem to have come out okay and preserved that. So we went ahead and we did the Jawbreaker thing, changed the graphics, put it on the market. Atari called up and basically said, that's copyright infringement. We're going to have the only licensed Pac-Man game, and so we had some lawsuit problems, and at one point they had said, we still want to sell the Pac-Man game. If you guys want to give us your code, we'll just sell it. You can keep Jawbreaker on the market until our cartridge is ready. That's going to be a few months anyway. And Ken Williams looked at me and said, that's really a good deal, because the game's going to dwindle in sales by that time anyway. Atari was going to give us $4 a cartridge for their version, so we thought that was really great. When we went out there, Atari kind of changed their mind, changed their offer to 50 cents a cartridge, and told us we had until 5 p.m. that night to take it off the market, or we'd be sued. So we kind of said, the heck with you, in not quite those nice terms, and went back. Did get sued, but we won. Both Atari and Midway won the copyright infringement. I didn't really understand a lot about what was going on, but I guess the things that, I can look back and say the things that were copied under, or protected under copyright, were just the visual qualities, and since we had changed the graphics and everything, we got away with it. I can actually fill in a little bit more about the Apple Fest incident. When I saw the Frogger game, and I wanted to do Frogger, and went to Ken Williams and thought it would be a really good license, and why don't we just go out and literally see if we can get a legal license for this and do the real thing, and we were able to get that from Sega, and they. After we got approved, Ken said, I got a computer show coming up in 3 days. What can you get me as a demo? And I said, well, I'll see what I can do. And I worked something like, 20 to 22 hours a day for the next 3 days, and came out with what ended up being the shipping version of all the graphics, all 50 colors on screen, all the motion and everything. There was a static frog sitting on the bottom of the screen you couldn't move yet, but basically everything else was done. And I gave it to him, and I was really thrilled. At that time, I really loved promoting Atari machines, and I didn't find out until, not even the next day or the next month. I didn't find out until a long time down the road that show was an Apple Fest. And he literally had a big screen TV, an Apple computer sitting in front of it, and an Atari computer in a cardboard box behind it. And the only thing that made that incident fun for me is when I saw what the Apple version of Frogger came out and actually looked like. And it was so bad, and they took so much heat over that because they showed this other version, and of course the people that really knew, they knew that wasn't an Apple computer. But the people that bought it and expected something that looked like Atari Frogger and got these square red boxes moving across the screen. And of course those were the lucky people. The lucky people had the square boxes. The people with black and white monitors couldn't see a thing. Because when you look at artifacted graphics, and it works the same way on the Atari, you draw every other line on the screen, and if you draw the even lines, it comes up red, and if you draw the odd lines, it comes up blue, or vice versa. Well, when you look at Apple Frogger in black and white, you've got red logs on blue water, both every other line. So all it looks like is just one solid mass, and you can't see any objects on it. So anyhow, they took a lot of heat for that, and so I was able to go, yeah, see what happens when you don't play fair. I think I have probably the distinction of being one of the last people to make my sole living on programming Atari 800 software, and I'm sure most of you here don't have a clue what I'm talking about because I haven't done a game for so long. But I had, with various other things going on, I left the game market for a long time. I did what are called character generators. They're like cable TV and hotels. You'll see a screen with messages and displays and advertising and that kind of thing. That was a market that in the mid-'80s was dominated by dedicated hardware machines costing like $4,000 or $5,000, and I was able to just absolutely completely blow away what they were doing on $100. At that time, the Atari machines, were just a couple $100 or something like that computer. And I mean, it was even to the point to where we would under-advertise what it was capable of doing. People would call up and say, okay, I see this thing's supposed to do this, and I know it obviously can't do that. So tell me what it does do, and I'll probably still buy it. And then when we tell them that it's actually been expanded since then, they really find it hard to believe. So that was really fun. I got a lot of. It was an interesting way to still be able to program the machine that I really liked, and it was a new industry. I got a lot of offshoots of it. If you ever get out to the Maui airport in Hawaii, all of the arrival and departure screens are done on Ataris. We got to do the installation out there, kind of a custom version. There's some on-screen TV guides for cable systems that are done on Atari systems. Anyhow, I did that from mid to late 80s all the way up through about 1994, 95. 95, I was still selling these character generator systems. And a little bit before that, I had trouble, as you can imagine, trouble getting Atari hardware itself. I mean, I scavenged yard sales and ads and all kinds of things to get boxes because people didn't, I wasn't selling software, I was selling a machine that somebody would plug in and do the character generator stuff. And so it didn't really matter where I got it from, it just at some point I had to make the hardware look, and you couldn't buy a used piece of hardware, it had to look fairly good. But I was calling around a bunch of places and I stumbled across this company that was making literally an Atari clone. And even more so than that, if people are familiar with the Apple II GS, it's almost like the Apple II GS equivalent in the Atari world. It's got a 65816 processor in it at 5.5 megahertz. Battery backed up static RAM. It's really cool. You can unplug the machine and plug it back in, and it says, "Hi, I'm still here. Everything's still where you left it." Internal high density floppy hard drive. Serial and parallel ports, interrupt-driven mouse, all kinds of nifty stuff. IBM style detached keyboard. I guess they made this machine because they wanted to put. I'm not even really sure what the product was. I believe it was some kind of home controller, like the X10 things or something like that. Some centralized unit that they were going to use this computer for. That product never did come to market. But they were gonna make these machines, and I came across them, and so they wound up making them for my product as well. As it turned out, they made it for my product only because theirs got canceled before production. But it let me stay in business a long time, another 3 years or so. I had pretty much thought that I was going to have to get out of it and go on to something else. I'd since gotten an Amiga, which is still kind of the same J Miner design. I'm probably J Miner's biggest fan. I think he is the only designer to this day that designs systems with programmers in mind. I mean, he gives us so much stuff to work with and so much fun, and it's well thought out, and it's super well integrated, and I can't say enough good things about him and his designs, and it's really sad that we lost him a few years back. But anyhow, for whatever reason,
time somebody goes, where did they find this stuff on this guy's flea market? So somebody actually went there, like the woods were the janitors. They used to go out at night and clean up after most of the people were gone. One day after the weekend, he goes, I found this thing at the flea market. It looks sort of like things that you guys work on here. Do you think anybody would want it? And he brings it in, and it was one of the RC Stellas. It had been ripped off out of the lab some earlier time, not too long in the past. And somebody took it out from the board, and he saw it on the table and bought it for like, Bill Kunkel, keynote across the hall. Bill Kunkel, keynote across the hall.
Catch you later.
yours, 39.95.
Yes, thank you.
Excuse me, he needs change again.
Okay, what do you need? We need like 21. 21? No problem.
The newest Atari 2600 game. There you go. Got you on tape.
I'll give you 10-1. What you can't do is send somebody to the casino and get change at the casino.
I don't know. Can your computer go?
I think we can all agree that the video game industry has changed in a quarter century. Companies make systems that are nips ahead of the time that Power has evaluated by how many sprites and colors could be on a screen simultaneously. Technology includes terms related to texture mapping and full motion video instead of bank switching and video blanks. Gaming magazines tend to allocate more space to well-endowed polygons named Lara. Publishers select games that scatter oceans of blood-red pixels across the screen and replay digitized screens of real-time animated monsters being ripped apart to terrorize more than just our imaginations. I worked hard in that line. This weekend's World of Atari 98 show is indicative of this old trend that is re-emerging. It is one that explores the value of updating and republishing classic video games. Most recent examples include Activision's libraries of Atari 2600 and Commodore 64 compilations for the PC, Hasbro's release of Frogger, Namco's release of Namco Museum for the PlayStation, and other releases such as Centipede and Asteroids. I think it's exciting that companies are putting back in the hands easy access to the games we played so fondly in years gone by. In my opinion, this trend is not a step backward by any stretch of the imagination. But I do believe that the video game industry has successfully established a new market of game players in the last decade. By doing so, they have abandoned the original phenomenon that built the industry 20 years ago, and thus they've abandoned those of us who loved it so much. I guess it could be similar as if the music industry gave up on classical, swing, blues, or jazz just because most of the world seems to appreciate some form of rock. So what is it that exactly built the industry? What is the phenomenon that differentiates the games of the 90s from those that we introduced in the 70s and 80s? Many of us at Atari had a formula, had a name for that phenomenon, that essence that I think differentiated the games from then and now. I don't know if anybody has ever defined it as well as I'm going to attempt to very quickly here. But it was known as three simple words, and that was called the fun factor. Some of you might have actually heard that phrase. I define the fun factor as a phenomenon that includes 5 primary components. I remember these components because if you spell them out into an anagram, they spell press, as in press the fire button. I'm going to go through them very quickly here. One is high score potential. Second one is repetition. The third one is ease of learning. The fourth one is strategy. And the fifth one is secrets. I can't tell you about the secrets. All games, past and present, have to have some mixture of some of these components. But I think only the original classic games consistently maintain a balance of every one of them. I want to cover each of them very quickly so you know what I'm talking about. First, I mentioned high score potential. And forgive me, I'm stealing the P from potential, so I am cheating a little bit on that one. You might remember Pong had scoring. It had to. It was the only measure of how one did when playing the game. A higher score than your opponent meant that you won the game. A higher score than the computer player meant that you beat the game. But by today's standard, the scores are awfully unimpressive. A good game of Pong might include a score of 11, maybe 15, depending on the version of Pong being played. Then there were games like Warlord's Breakout Missile Command. Settling games allowed players to score as high into the hundreds, maybe thousands. Then along came Galaxian and Phoenix, which doused players with scores in the tens and hundreds of thousands. Eventually, next-generation games took over the high scores that have been fading fast. Games are too complicated to score anymore. Racing games give lap times
RPGs, reward players with new levels and fulfill objectives. Arcades no longer publish player high scores over each machine. And we never hear about a game that revealed something unusual simply because a determined player hit a new high score. There's an article I found in the most recent September issue of Next Generation magazine. The article starts on page 10, and it's titled, "When was the last time you scored?" It includes, and I quote, it concludes, and I quote, "Will score ever come back? Probably not. As technology evolves, games will probably become more complex, and current titles that still employ a high score, such as N20, Einhander, and Incoming, are an ever smaller minority." The article sheds some rays of hope, however, and I quote further, "But classic games are making something of a comeback. Titles like Centipede and Asteroids are being retrofitted for the 90s with score intact." Sadly, the author concludes, "Still it's safe to say that score will never play the pivotal role it once did in the gaming industry." If nothing else, I'm not the only one that believes that high score potential is an elementary difference between the games of today and yesterday. Let's look at the second element that I listed, repetition. When I say repetition, I'm describing the ability to identify a way that a game is played within the first few seconds of pressing the start button and depend on the overall premise to stay the same throughout the entire course of the game. Pitfall is a game that includes climbing, swinging, and jumping in a horizontal scrolling format. The obstacles may change their positions, the ladder may not always be on the left, and it may not always be on the right, but the game never ends up being different than how it started. Each new wave, each new level predictably resembles the one prior. Someone might say, but Gorf deviated from the formula, and Donkey Kong had a series of different virtual game venues that had a lot of changes from one level to the next. Well, not really. It may have taken more than a few seconds to learn the new looks of each level, but eventually they recycled, and the series of levels fit the definition of repetition that I'm trying to describe here. Okay, let's look at ease of learning, the E in the diagram that defines the fun factor. Many people tell me that the ease of learning is not at all missing from games today. They bring up games like Unreal, Gran Turismo, or Crash Bandicoot. Yes, these are relatively easy to learn, but they're still far more complex than walking up to a machine, dropping a quarter, and driving a circle through a maze to eat dots and avoid ghosts. I've played Unreal. It's unreal. It's fun. But there are a lot of complexities, too. A lot of passages to discover, a lot of items to recover, a very difficult game to just sit down and compete against your previous high score. I've played Gran Turismo. It is undeniably a phenomenal racing game. Of course, I've had to be concerned with a lot more than I did with Night Dragger or Pole Position. There's tire tread, engine capabilities, car handling, not much instant plug and play. I've enjoyed many hours of Crash Bandicoot and Crash Bandicoot 2, PlayStation. I know I will rush out and buy Crash Bandicoot 3. But it is more complex of a game to learn and accomplish than Space Invaders and Missile Command. Games from yesteryear, games that were filled with the fun factor, were never hard to learn. Often hard to master, but they were never hard to learn. All games require the gamer to learn and apply a strategy to master the gameplay. We're on to strategy. Whether it is checkers or Othello, boxing, or Street Fighter, there are one or more strategic moves that enable the competitors to score better with experience. Something that you can learn to play the game better, not because the game has changed, but the ability of you playing the game has improved. Finally, the fun factor is unleashed in any specific game when there are secrets. It might be secrets in a hidden level or a character, maybe it's a code to add lives or weapons, maybe it's a way to see the programmer's initials, such as in Atari's Adventure or Yar's Revenge. Or perhaps it's a fascinating story on how the game was developed or marketed. Many of you people are going to be asking people on the other side about some of those stories. So why does the understanding of the fun factor and the appealing aspects of video games from yesteryear have a significance to you and me today? Because we are approaching a new fork in the road, an opportunity to go in new directions. New generations of video game systems such as Dreamcast and Project X, as well as whatever competing products are designed to knock the socks off the mass market. And before we embark on the journey to the next generation of technology, let's check the rearview mirror. Let us begin to recognize that the market wants to play classic favorites or new games that instill a fun factor into them, as well as the new games that we've seen out there already. Let's put high score back into the game.
How many Jaguar titles and Lynx titles, for that matter, were finished but never released? We hear different numbers.
I dare say that there weren't that many that were actually what you would consider finished. There were quite a few that were near finished. There were quite a few that the third-party developer, if they were developing, would have said they're finished, but inside we were saying they aren't finished. So there were actually very few. There were a lot of titles that got quite a ways along. The first one that comes to mind was something Black Ice, White Noise. Several titles along that line. And then and I can't remember them offhand. That's why I put IC1 together, because when I need to know something, I refer to it. But there weren't that many that were actually finished. The Breakout 2000 was finished when it all decided that. Did you say Lynx or Jaguar?
Both.
Okay. Breakout 2000 was finished when it all broke down, and we found a way to eventually get published in Telegames, I think. But sadly, what people have thought there were some games like, I'm embarrassed, I can't remember the title. Wasn't there a game with a penguin near the end? What was it? Right, Attack of the Mutant Penguins, and a couple of others that were actually held in the warehouse after the JTS deal came public. And I had a suspicion at the time, and I'm quite convinced now, that they were held strictly to give the illusion to the Security Exchange Commission that they were honoring their commitment to continue developing our games. But they sat in the warehouse being held so that we could release it later saying that it was a new release. And I know for a fact they were held, but I am theorizing why they were held.
Down payment.
I thought you said it was down.
Yes. You take Frank.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right, that's it? Yeah. Okay, one line?
You know at the end of it, make sure that has a file folder that share somewhere on one of these boards where they can see the lot number.
Atari 800 XE computer sold in Europe. Sold in the US as the Atari 65 XE. Take a look at that unit. What's that one for? $200 to go. It's $200 if you put it in, $200 to get started. $100 if you put it in. $100 if you put it in, $10, $100 in now, 10, 110, now 120, you put it 130, 130, now 140, now 150. 150 is now 160, you put it 170, 160 with the book, you put it 170. 160 with the book, you put it 170, put it 170, 160, 170, now 180, now 190. $180 if you put it 190, 130, now 190, now 195. $190 if you put it 195, 190, now 195, now 200. $195 if you put it 200. Now 5. 200 now 210. 25 is now 210. 5 is now 210. 5 is now 210. 210 is now 215. 215 now 220. 215 is now 220. 215 is now 220. Anyone else? 215 is 220. 215 is now 220. 220 just in time, now 205. 220 with the 25, 25, 230. 225 is now 230. You must really want it at 225 is now 230. It's only $5 which you got to lose. 225 is now 230. Now 235 is now 235. And 230 is now 235. You sure 230 is now 235. 230 which is now 5. Sold it at $230. Number 104. Whoa!